The cosmic engineering network credits humanity with making complex technology simple. Part 1. Aura had been evaluating species for the Cosmic Engineering Network for nearly 300 years. In all that time, she had never been afraid of a repair manual. She was afraid now. The human document sat on her desk in the CEN headquarters, uploaded from Earth as part of humanity's application for associate membership. The title read Basic Fusion Reactor Maintenance, a guide for station technicians. Aura had opened it expecting the usual 1,000 pages of mathematical proofs, safety protocols, and required certifications. Instead, she found 42 pages with illustrations. Illustrations, like it was a children's book. The first page showed a simple diagram of a fusion reactor with arrows pointing to various components. Each arrow had a label: plasma chamber, the hot part; magnetic containment, keeps the hot part from touching anything; fuel injector, puts fuel in the hot part. Aura felt her neck ridges flush with embarrassment on humanity's behalf. She paged through the manual with growing horror. Step-by-step instructions with pictures, troubleshooting guides that asked questions like, is the red light on? If yes, push the blue button. Safety procedures that could be read in 5 minutes. Most damning of all, a section titled, If Nothing Else Works, that suggested turning the reactor off and back on again. This was the species that wanted to join the galactic community's most prestigious engineering institution. This was the species that had somehow developed functional fusion reactors, antimatter storage, and basic warp capability in less than 2 centuries. Either humanity was concealing their real knowledge, or they were dangerously incompetent. Aura's supervisor, director, manifested his holographic form beside her desk, the energy being pulsed with what she had learned to recognize as amusement. Your expression suggests concern, said. Concern, Aura gestured at the human manual. Director, they have reduced fusion containment protocols to that a child could follow. And their reactors function. According to their reports, yes. But that's not the point. These systems require precise understanding of quantum dynamics, plasma physics, electromagnetic field theory. You cannot simply point at components and say, this is the hot part, and expect safe operation. Glow flickered thoughtfully. The humans have operated fusion reactors for 78 years. Their catastrophic failure rate is 0.03%. Our member species average 0.09%. Aura's ridges flattened in surprise. That must be an error in the data. I checked 3 times. The humans also report that 85% of their reactor operators require only 6 months of training. Most of our species require 6 years minimum, often with genetic modifications or neural augmentation to process the necessary information. Which proves they don't understand what they're doing, Aura insisted. They've been lucky so far. When their luck runs out, people will die. Perhaps. His hologram drifted toward the window overlooking the vast CEN campus, where thousands of beings from hundreds of species studied the galaxy's most advanced technologies. Or perhaps they understand something we don't. I want you to visit Earth's Mars facility, observe their methods. If you find evidence of dangerous practices, we'll deny their application and quarantine their technology sharing. If not, he paused. Well, that would be interesting, wouldn't it? 3 weeks later, Aura stood in the observation gallery above humanity's primary shipyard in Mars orbit. Below her, dozens of vessels in various states of construction filled the massive facility. Human workers moved between them, some in suits, others piloting cargo loaders, all working with an efficiency that seemed almost casual. Her guide was a human woman named Sarah, the facility's chief operations officer. Sarah wore simple coveralls and kept her graying hair tied back in a practical knot. She had greeted Aura with a warm smile and a handshake, something Aura's research had identified as a human greeting ritual involving the touching of hands. So what would you like to see first? Sarah asked. Your reactor maintenance procedures, Ara said. "I want to observe your safety protocols in action." "Sure thing. Reactor 7 is due for its monthly check. We can watch Tommy's crew handle it." Monthly check. Ara's species performed detailed reactor inspections quarterly, and each inspection required a team of 8 specialists working for 3 days. How long does a monthly check take? About 4 hours for a full inspection in tune-up. Longer if they find something wrong, obviously. 4 hours. Ara followed Sarah through the facility, taking notes on her. The human workspace was surprisingly cluttered compared to the sterile, precisely organized facilities she was used to. Tools hung on walls within easy reach. Spare parts were stored in bins labeled with simple words rather than proper classification codes. Workers ate food at their stations and listened to what Sarah called music while they worked. They arrived at Reactor 7 to find a crew of 5 humans already preparing. Ara recognized the setup immediately. It was a standard fusion reactor design, actually somewhat outdated by current Sen standards. The human modifications were visible. Someone had welded handholds to the exterior casing. The control panel had been replaced with a simpler version featuring large, clearly labeled buttons and several physical switches. The crew leader, Tommy, was a young human male with colorful markings on his arms that Sarah explained were tattoos. He nodded to Sarah and Ara, then began the inspection. Ara watched in mounting disbelief. Tommy didn't consult a technical manual. He didn't perform the standard 50-point initialization sequence. He simply walked around the reactor, running his hands along the casing, listening to the hum of the machinery. At one point, he pressed his ear against the metal. "Bearings sound a little rough in the fuel pump," Tommy said to his crew. "Let's check that first." One of the crew members opened an access panel, not by entering an authorization code or using a biometric scanner. She just turned a handle and pulled. Inside, the components were clearly visible, each one labeled with a number and color-coded based on function. The crew member used a handheld device to measure something, consulted a chart on her, and nodded. "Bearing temperature is up 2 degrees, she reported. "Still in safe range, but yeah, it's wearing." "Let's replace it," Tommy said. "Better now than during a critical burn." The crew proceeded to replace the bearing. The entire operation took 20 minutes. They removed 6 bolts, pulled out the old bearing, inserted a new one from a nearby storage bin, tightened the bolts, and closed the panel. No clean room protocols. No electromagnetic shielding. No certified specialists from the bearing manufacturer. Ara couldn't stay silent. "You just performed an unauthorized modification to a reactor fuel system." Tommy looked up, seeming to notice her for the first time. "Unauthorized? Sarah's right here. She's operations chief." "I mean without proper certification, without following manufacturer protocols. That bearing should be installed by trained specialists in a controlled environment." "Oh," Tommy shrugged. "The manufacturer is us. We make these bearings in Shop 12, and I am trained. I've been working on reactors for 6 years." 6 years? Ara's voice rose despite her attempt to remain professional. "I studied reactor systems for 18 years before I was allowed to touch a fuel system component." "Huh," Tommy considered this. "That seems like a long time. I mean, it's just a bearing. It spins, it wears out, you replace it. Not really complicated." "The tolerances required for a fusion reactor fuel pump bearing are measured in microns. The installation procedure has 73 steps. Each step must be and documented." "Sure, if you want to make it complicated." Tommy pulled out his and showed her a document. "We documented it, see. Replaced bearing on fuel pump. New bearing ID number FP7734. Torque set to spec. Temperature nominal. Done." Ara stared at the brief note that Tommy considered adequate documentation. This was worse than she had thought. These humans didn't just simplify procedures. They didn't seem to understand why the procedures existed in the first place. The inspection continued. The crew checked fuel levels, tested safety systems, calibrated sensors, and replaced two other components that showed wear. They worked with relaxed efficiency, sometimes joking with each other, always explaining what they were doing in simple terms. At one point, Tommy's chirped with a message. He read it, frowned, and turned to Sarah. "Reactor 3 is showing a containment field fluctuation," he said. "Nothing critical, but it's outside normal parameters." "Can you handle it after this?" Sarah asked. "Yeah, probably just needs a. I'll take Meyer and check it out." "Probably." The word made Ara's neck ridges stand straight up. "Probably. A containment field fluctuation could lead to catastrophic failure. It required immediate shutdown, comprehensive analysis, and systematic troubleshooting by multiple specialists." "I must insist we observe this repair as well," Ara said. 30 minutes later, Ara stood in front of Reactor 3 with Tommy and another crew member named Maya. The reactor was still running, still operating at full power while showing a containment field anomaly. This was madness. Tommy pulled up the reactor's diagnostic display. A graph showed the magnetic field strength fluctuating slightly, creating a small wobble in what should be a perfectly smooth curve. "There's your problem," Maya said, pointing at a number on the screen. "Field generator 4 is pulling 0.02% more power than the others. It's trying to compensate for something." Tommy nodded and pulled open another access panel. Inside were 4 identical cylindrical devices, each about the size of a human fist. Small lights blinked on each one. 3 blinked in perfect synchronization. The 4th was slightly off rhythm. "Aha," Tommy said. He reached in and tapped the 4th cylinder with his knuckle. The blinking synchronized. The wobble in the graph disappeared. Ara stared. "You fixed a containment field fluctuation by hitting it." "Percussion maintenance," Maya said cheerfully. "Sometimes components get stuck. A little tap helps." "That is not." Ara struggled to find words. "You cannot simply hit precision equipment and expect it to function correctly." "Why not?" Tommy asked. "It worked." "Because there could be a fundamental flaw in the component. Because the fluctuation could be a symptom of a deeper problem. Because hitting precision equipment is not an acceptable maintenance procedure." "But the fluctuation's gone," Tommy pointed at the now smooth graph. "If it comes back, we'll replace the generator, but right now it's working fine." Ara spent the rest of the day observing various maintenance procedures. Every single one violated SEN standards in multiple ways. The humans used improvised tools. They made judgment calls based on experience rather than following detailed procedures. They treated incredibly complex technology as if it were simple machinery that any competent person could understand and repair. And somehow, impossibly, everything worked. That evening, Ara sat in her temporary quarters reviewing her notes. She had documented dozens of violations, hundreds of deviations from accepted practices. The report she would write should recommend immediate denial of humanity's application and a quarantine on their technology sharing until they learned proper procedures. But she kept thinking about that graph, the containment field that stabilized after Tommy tapped the generator, the bearing that was replaced in 20 minutes instead of 3 days, the crew that maintained an entire facility with a fraction of the personnel that should have been required. Her chirped, an emergency signal from CEN headquarters. She opened it and felt her heart sink. A research vessel, the Complexity's Pride, was stranded in the Helix Nebula. Antimatter reactor failure. They were attempting the emergency stabilization procedures, but the containment was degrading. Estimated time to catastrophic breach, 6 hours. Ara checked the vessel's location. The nearest SEN ship with qualified antimatter specialists was 9 hours away. There was no time. Then she saw another notation on the emergency alert. A human vessel, the Simplicity, was only 2 hours away. They were offering assistance. Ara closed her eyes. She thought about Tommy hitting a containment field generator with his knuckle. She thought about procedures that took minutes instead of days. She thought about humans who treated advanced technology like simple machinery. She opened a communication channel to the simplicity and did something she had never expected to do. She accepted help from the humans, then sent a priority message to the complexity's pride. Her message was brief: human assistance inbound, let them help, trust me. She hoped she wasn't making a fatal mistake. Part 2. Captain Maria Santos had been testing the Simplicity's new waste recycling system when the distress call came through. The recycling system was making a weird grinding noise that said was probably fine, which meant it definitely wasn't fine, but also probably wouldn't explode. When the ship's AI announced an emergency signal from a CEN vessel, Maria actually felt grateful for the distraction. "Pull up the details," she told her first officer, James Park. James read from his display. CEN research vessel Complexity's Pride, 6 crew members from 5 different species. Their antimatter reactor is failing. Containment at 60% and dropping. They're in the Helix Nebula, about 2 hours from our position. Are they attempting repairs? Yes, but according to their broadcast, the repair procedure is complex. They need all 6 crew members working in coordination, and the process takes approximately 8 hours. Maria looked at the countdown timer that had appeared on the main screen. Time to containment failure, 5 hours 42 minutes. They don't have 8 hours. No, ma'am. Set course for their position, maximum warp, and tell to get his toolkit ready. Was in engineering when Maria found him, precisely where she expected him to be. The chief engineer was lying on his back underneath the antimatter regulator, muttering to himself. Tools were spread around him in a pattern that probably made sense to, but looked like chaos to everyone else. "We've got a rescue operation," Maria said. Slid out from under the regulator. He was a big man with permanent grease stains on his uniform and a tendency to explain things using phrases like "the thingy that makes the other thingy work." He also had an almost supernatural ability to fix anything mechanical, often in ways that made no sense but somehow worked perfectly. "What broke?" he asked. "Send vessel, antimatter reactor going critical. They're attempting the standard emergency procedure." "How long they got?" "About 5.5 hours. The procedure takes 8. Stood up and grabbed his toolkit, a battered metal box that he'd owned since his academy days. "Then, I guess they need a faster procedure." They arrived at the Complexity's Pride 93 minutes later. The Sen vessel was a sleek research ship, all smooth curves and elegant design. It looked expensive. It also looked dead in space, running on emergency power with visible fluctuations in its shield generators. Maria hailed them. "This is Captain Santos of the Earth vessel Simplicity. We're here to assist." The face that appeared on screen was reptilian, with elaborate neck ridges and golden eyes. Maria recognized the species as the woman looked exhausted. "Captain Santos, I am Aura of the Cosmic Engineering Network. I appreciate your response, but I'm not certain you understand the situation. This is an antimatter containment failure. It requires specialized knowledge." "We have specialized knowledge," Maria said. "My chief engineer has worked on antimatter systems for 12 years. Aura's ridges flattened in what Maria had learned was skepticism. "I have been studying antimatter systems for 29 years. This particular failure is attempting to execute the approved emergency stabilization procedure, which requires coordinated input from specialists in quantum field dynamics, antimatter physics, containment engineering, power systems, and emergency protocols. The procedure has been carefully designed to—" "How much time do you have left?" interrupted, leaning into frame. Aura paused. 4 hours 18 minutes. "And how long does your procedure take?" 7 hours and 42 minutes, assuming perfect execution. Looked at Maria. "Permission to board their ship." Maria nodded. Granted, take Maya with you. 10 minutes later, and Maya, the Simplicity Systems specialist, had docked with the Complexity's Pride and were making their way to the engineering section. Maria watched through's helmet camera as they entered a room that looked more like a museum than an engine room. The antimatter reactor dominated the center of the space, a gleaming sphere surrounded by a complex array of equipment. 6 aliens worked around it, each at a different station. They moved with careful precision, consulting displays that showed incredibly detailed readouts. One of them, a being made entirely of crystalline structures, was inputting what looked like a mathematical equation that filled 3 screens. Ara met them at the entrance. "Your engineer may observe, but please do not interfere. We are at a critical stage of the procedure." Walked past her to the reactor. He stood there for a moment just looking. Then he walked around it slowly, occasionally stopping to peer at something. One of the alien engineers, a massive creature covered in thick fur, tried to explain what they were doing. "We are rebalancing the containment field matrices by calculating the precise quantum corrections needed for each of the 17 field generators. Once we have the calculations, we will input them simultaneously while maintaining harmonic resonance across all power channels. This must be done in perfect synchronization, or the containment will collapse." "Aha," said. He wasn't looking at the screens. He was looking at the reactor itself. He walked over to a wall panel, opened it, and stuck his head inside. "Sir, that panel contains high-voltage systems," the furry alien said nervously. "Yeah, I see that," pulled his head out and moved to another panel. "Maya, you got your scanner." Maya pulled out a handheld device and started running it over different parts of the reactor. Electromagnetic readings are all over the place. Power distribution is uneven, and there's a weird harmonic in the field generators. "Thought so." Walked over to the main control panel where the crystalline being was working. "Excuse me." He reached past the startled alien and pulled up a different screen. This one showed a diagram of the power system, studied it for maybe 30 seconds, then nodded to himself. "Found your problem," he said. Ara approached, her neck ridges raised in what Maria had learned was agitation. "Mister, we are executing a carefully planned procedure. We cannot simply—" "Your power distribution node is failing," said, pointing at a component on the diagram. "Specifically, this relay right here. It's supposed to feed equal power to all 17 field generators, but it's gone wonky. Some generators are getting too much power, others not enough. That's why your containment field is unstable." "The power distribution node," Ara looked at the diagram. "That component has multiple redundancies. It cannot fail." Well, it did. Was already heading toward a different part of the engineering section. "Where's your parts storage?" "We do not have replacement power distribution nodes," a new voice said. Maria saw a small, amphibious-looking alien near one of the stations. "That component is permanent. It's designed to last the lifetime of the vessel." "Nothing's permanent," said. "Everything breaks eventually. You really don't carry spares for your critical systems." "The power distribution node is manufactured specifically for each vessel. It requires 6 months to produce and must be installed by certified technicians at an authorized facility." Stopped walking. "You're kidding." "I assure you, I am not capable of humor regarding safety systems." "Okay, new plan." Turned to Maya. "We need to bypass the failing relay and redistribute the power manually. Can you rig something with what we've got?" "Probably," Maya said, already pulling components out of her toolkit. "We'll need to reroute through the secondary power channels and set up physical regulators for each generator." Physical regulators. Ara's ridges were now standing almost perpendicular to her neck. "The power balance requires precision at the quantum level. Physical regulators cannot possibly." "Sure they can," said. "They won't be as elegant as your automated system, but they'll work. Maya, you handle generators 1 through 8. I'll take 9 through 17. Maria watched as her crew began working with practiced efficiency. They ignored the carefully designed control interfaces and went straight to the hardware. Used what he called a jumper cable to reroute power, something that made the furry alien's eyes widen in horror. Maya attached small devices to various components, each one calibrated by eye rather than with mathematical precision. The alien crew watched in stunned silence. After about 20 minutes, the crystalline being spoke quietly to Aura in a language the translator rendered as something about violation of fundamental principles. Then did something that made Maria wince even through the video feed. He pulled a cargo clamp from his toolkit, the kind used to secure containers in a ship's hold, and attached it to the antimatter reactor's main power conduit. He wedged someone's drinking container, it looked like a metal cup, into the clamp to create pressure on a specific point. Maria said carefully, "Did you just jury-rig an antimatter reactor with a cargo clamp and a coffee cup?" "Water bottle," corrected. "And yeah, the power conduit has a slight bend in it from thermal expansion. That bend was creating resistance in the wrong places. This straightens it out." The power conduit is rated for extreme temperatures and is precisely calibrated, Aura said. Her voice had gone very quiet. "You cannot simply bend it back into shape with a cargo clamp." "Well, I didn't bend it, the heat did. I'm just bending it." Maya finished her work and stepped back. "That should do it." "Yep, let's bring it online." Walked to the control panel and started pressing buttons. Not carefully, not slowly. He just poked at the interface like he was ordering food from a menu. One of the alien engineers made a sound like a distressed whistle. "You need to input the activation sequence in the proper order," the furry alien said. "Each step must be before proceeding to the next. If you—" The reactor hummed. The fluctuating readings on all the displays suddenly smoothed out. The containment field stabilized at 98%, well into the safe range. The countdown timer to catastrophic failure vanished. The engineering bay was silent. Turned to Aura. "There you go, should be fine now. You'll want to get a proper replacement for that power node when you can, but this'll hold until you reach a station." Aura stared at the displays. Her neck ridges had gone completely flat. What did you?" "The machine was fighting itself," explained. "The failing relay was sending uneven power, so the containment field was constantly trying to rebalance. That made everything unstable. We just gave each field generator its own dedicated power supply and straightened out the conduit so the power flows clean. Simple fix, really." "Simple," Aura repeated. She looked at the cargo clamp and water bottle attached to their reactor. "You fixed our antimatter containment system in 23 minutes using a cargo clamp." "And Maya's regulators," added. "Give credit where it's due." Maya waved from across the room, happy to help. The crystalline being approached slowly. Up close, Maria could see tiny fractals of color shifting through its body. "Human engineer," it said carefully. "I have studied antimatter physics for 41 years. I have 2 doctoral degrees in quantum field dynamics. How did you diagnose our problem so quickly?" "Well, I just looked at what the machine was doing and figured out what it was trying to do," said. "Then I thought about what might stop it from doing that. Bad power distribution makes sense. It's usually power or cooling when a reactor acts up." "Usually." The crystalline being's colors shifted to something that might have been confusion. "How many antimatter reactor failures have you repaired?" "This is my first antimatter one," admitted. "But reactors are reactors. Doesn't matter if it's fusion, antimatter, or an old combustion engine. They all work on the same basic principle. You've got fuel, you've got containment, you've got power distribution. When something goes wrong, you check those systems and see what's not working right." Aura moved closer. "Mister, you treated a quantum-level precision system like a simple machine." "It is a simple machine," said. "Somebody just made it complicated." Over the next hour, as the complexity's pride ran diagnostics to verify the repair, ended up explaining his approach to the fascinated alien crew. They followed him around like students, asking questions about his methods. "How do you know which components can be bypassed?" the amphibious alien asked. "You don't always," said, "but most systems have redundancy built in, even if the designers don't call it that. You just have to think about what the system actually needs versus what would be nice to have. But without proper calculations, how do you ensure safety? You test as you go. Make a change, check the readings, see if it helped or hurt. If it helped, keep going. If it hurt, undo it and try something else." The furry alien looked scandalized. "That's trial and error. That's not engineering." "Sure it is," said. "It's just faster." Ara had been quiet during most of this. Now she spoke up. "Mister, I must ask you something. What level of education do you have in antimatter physics?" "None," said. "Never studied it specifically." "Quantum field dynamics?" "Nope." "Advanced mathematics, theoretical physics?" "I took calculus in school. Does that count?" Ara's ridges fluttered in what might have been disbelief. "Then how did you know what to do?" "Thought about that for a moment. I guess I just thought about what I'd want if I was an antimatter reactor. I'd want steady power, right? And I'd want everything balanced so I'm not working harder on one side than the other. When I saw your power node was sending uneven feed, it was obvious that would make the reactor struggle. So we fixed that." "You anthropomorphized our reactor," Ara said slowly. "You imagined what it would want." "I mean, kinda. I just tried to understand what it was trying to accomplish. Machines are built to do specific things. When they're not doing those things right, something's stopping them. Figure out what's stopping them, remove it, and they work again." The crystalline being pulsed with colors that the translator couldn't interpret. "This is the most reductive explanation of complex system maintenance I have ever encountered." "Is that bad?" asked. "I don't know," the alien admitted. "It worked, so perhaps not." As and Maya prepared to return to the simplicity, Ara pulled aside. "Mister, I have a question that has been troubling me since you arrived. You violated dozens of safety protocols. You used components in ways they were not designed for. You made modifications without proper authorization or testing. And yet your repair worked perfectly. How do you reconcile this?" Shrugged. "The protocols exist to keep people safe. I get that. But sometimes following the protocol exactly means people die because you run out of time. You guys were following the perfect procedure, and it would have gotten you all killed. Sometimes good enough right now is better than perfect too late." "Good enough," Ara repeated. She looked like she was tasting the words. "We do not teach that at the Cosmic Engineering Network. We teach precision, excellence, perfection." "Those are great," said, "but they're not always practical. Look, your power node is going to fail eventually, right? It's built to last forever, but forever isn't real. Everything breaks. Wouldn't it be better to build things that are easy to fix when they break instead of things that supposedly never break but leave you stranded when they do?" Ara was quiet for a long moment. "That is a very different philosophy." "Maybe, but it keeps people alive." Back on the simplicity, Maria found in the mess hall eating dinner. He had a blueprint spread across the table next to his food. "What are you working on?" she asked. "The waste recycler," said around a mouthful of food, still making that grinding noise. "I think I know what's wrong, though." "Is it the bearings?" "Nah, the bearings are fine. It's the control computer. It's trying to run the system at maximum efficiency, which means it's constantly making tiny adjustments. Those adjustments are wearing out the gears. I'm going to install a manual override so we can just set it to run at 85% and leave it alone." Maria smiled. "Let me guess, good enough is better than perfect." "Exactly." A message came through from CEN headquarters. Maria opened it and felt her eyebrows rise. "Well, The Cosmic Engineering Network wants to send an observer to travel with us for a while. They want to study our maintenance procedures. Who's the observer? A named Aura. Grinned. She was pretty impressed with the cargo clamp solution. I think she was horrified. Same thing, really. Maria looked at the message again. Something about the tone suggested this wasn't just a routine observation. The Sen wanted to understand how humanity approached technology. She wasn't sure if that was a good sign or a bad one. But it saved 6 lives today using a cargo clamp and common sense. Maybe it was time the galaxy learned that sometimes the simplest solution was the best one. She sent a reply accepting the observer and went to get her own dinner, leaving to his blueprints and his philosophy of good enough. Part 3. Aura had been traveling aboard the Simplicity for 3 weeks, and she was having a crisis of faith. Not in her gods. Her species had abandoned religious thinking centuries ago. No, she was having a crisis of faith in everything the Cosmic Engineering Network had taught her over the past 300 years. She sat in the Simplicity's engineering bay watching train a new crew member named David. David had been aboard for exactly 4 days, was teaching him how to maintain the ship's fusion reactor. So this is the plasma chamber, said, tapping the large cylindrical component. That's where we smash atoms together to make power. Smash atoms together, David repeated, taking notes on his. Yep, these things around it are the magnetic containment coils. They keep the plasma from touching the walls because if it touches the walls melt. That seems bad. Very bad. So your main job is making sure these coils stay powered and balanced. You check them every day. If the readings look weird, you tell me. What counts as weird? Pulled up a display showing various numbers and graphs. See these? They should all be pretty close to each other. If one's a lot higher or lower than the others, that's weird. If the graphs are jumpy instead of smooth, that's weird. If anything's sparking or smoking or making a noise it shouldn't, that's definitely weird. How do I know what noise it shouldn't make? You'll learn what it normally sounds like. After a week or 2, you'll notice when something's different. Aura couldn't stay silent. Mister, you're teaching reactor maintenance based on subjective audio analysis. Looked over at her. Well, yeah, a bad bearing sounds different than a good bearing. A loose connection sounds different than a tight one. Your ears are a pretty good diagnostic tool. But the proper procedure is to use calibrated instruments to measure vibration frequency and amplitude. Sure, if you've got time for that. But if I'm walking past a reactor and I hear a weird grinding noise, I'm going to check it right then. Why would I wait to pull out an instrument? Because the instrument is objective, Aura wanted to say. Because subjective assessment leads to errors. Because this is how accidents happen. But she'd watched and his crew for 3 weeks, and they hadn't had a single accident. They'd prevented several, in fact, by noticing problems early through methods that would make any Sen instructor faint. David asked another question. What if I can't figure out what's wrong? Then you call me, said. That's the other important rule. If something's broken and you don't know how to fix it, don't guess. Ask someone who knows or look it up. Pride's not worth blowing up the ship. Okay, so check the coils every day. Listen for weird noises, ask if I don't know something. That's it. That's the basics. I'll teach you the complicated stuff as we go. After David left, Aura approached. That training session lasted 18 minutes. At the Sen, basic reactor maintenance training is a 6-month course. 6 months? Looked genuinely surprised. What do you do for 6 months? We teach the theoretical foundations. Plasma physics, electromagnetic field theory, materials science, thermodynamics, quantum mechanics. But does the average technician need to know all that? Interrupted. I mean, it's great if they want to learn it, but to do basic maintenance, to check that the coils are working and replace a part when it breaks, seems like overkill. Understanding the theory helps you understand what can go wrong. Maybe grabbed a rag and started cleaning grease off a tool. But I've found most people learn better by doing. David will spend the next few weeks watching the reactor, learning what normal looks like. When something breaks, he'll learn how to fix it. When something weird happens, he'll learn how to diagnose it. By the end of 3 months, he'll be competent. By the end of a year, he'll be good. Theory's great, but experience is better. Ara had been taking notes constantly since boarding the Simplicity. Her report to the Sen had grown to over 200 pages, and she still felt like she wasn't capturing everything. The humans didn't just simplify procedures. They